will now begin a round of 5-minute questions for our panel. I ask my colleagues to keep track of the clock and stay within that. Deputy Secretary Turk, your budget request for non-defense Department of Energy programs recommends a very healthy increase for the fiscal year 2023, and that funding, as I said, is really critical for programs that support clean energy and environmental cleanup and scientific discovery, our national security, our global competitiveness. It's a lot. House Republicans, as you know, have voted to cut overall funding back to fiscal year 2022 levels or worse. Can you give us some concrete examples of how cutting DOE back to those levels will hurt working class Americans?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. I'll give you 3 specific examples of what this means, and I'll compare what the House Republicans are proposing versus the FY23 enacted. It'd be even worse if you compared it to what we're proposing in FY24, but just compared to what's already in law and the baselines. So first on consumers, all that we're doing to try to help lower energy costs for consumers. What the FY22 level would be is a $62 million cut to weatherization, a program incredibly popular. What that translates into is more than 12,000 of our fellow Americans not getting the benefits of that program in terms of reducing their energy bills and providing greater efficiency. The rebates, that was such an important part of the legislation that was passed last Congress, and thank you to Senator Heinrich and Chair Murray and many others who were very supportive of that. This means that American consumers will not benefit from those rebates, and our estimates are that American consumers overall would benefit $1 billion in terms of lowering their bills each year annually because of that. So that will not be out there benefiting consumers across our country. On the science side, we've done some estimates of what that reduction in science, and it is a reduction. It's a significant reduction going to that FY22 level. What that means is we would have to lay off 5,200 scientists and others who work at our labs. It would mean all the science that we were planning to do, want to do, need to do to be competitive in the world, just as you said, Madam Chair, in terms of China and other countries stepping up, we'd have less ability to deal with that. In fact, we'd have 2,600 less users being able to come to all of our phenomenal facilities, and they'd have to go abroad or somewhere else to do the science that they want to do. And then third, on the competitiveness side, this is a very competitive environment with China, with other countries around the world. All of those provisions in the historic legislation passed last year, all those provisions cutting back to the FY22 level, at this critical moment, as we're getting momentum, the $100 billion I mentioned for battery manufacturing, all of that is pulled back at this critical moment when we're actually making progress.
So I think it's fair to say that cuts of that magnitude would force your department to really make some trade-offs between key priorities like keeping pace with our competitors' investments in research and innovation and protecting our nuclear arsenal and a lot more.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I was encouraged to see an historic request for the Hanford site in Washington State, especially as compared to fiscal year 2023, which was, as we all know, completely insufficient. And as I talked about, I'm pleased that DOE, Washington State, Department of College, and EPA have reached that conceptual agreement after more than 60 mediation sessions. In the announcement yesterday, DOE said that the President's proposed FY24 request is consistent with those conceptual agreements as it relates to tank waste. That's great news. But let's remind everybody, the federal government has a legal and moral obligation to clean up the Hanford site and protect Hanford workers. I'm certain you understand how strongly I feel about meeting that obligation. So I'm pleased that your budget builds on the progress we made at the Office of River Protection, specifically on the high-level waste facilities construction, but I am concerned that you're taking on unnecessary risks at Hanford's Richland office, which we should just not be robbing Peter to pay Paul. Let me ask you, what conditions merited the $85.3 million decrease to Richland from fiscal year 2023, and what risks would we be taking on as a result of that reduced level?
Well, first of all, let me completely agree. There's both a legal and a moral responsibility that all of us share in the executive branch and in Congress. And thank you for your leadership, again, for many, many years on this issue. I know it's something Secretary Granholm is passionate about. She's been out to Hanford. I've been out to Hanford. I'll be going out there in the not-too-distant future. And certainly our environmental management colleagues live and breathe this every day in terms of making progress on this front. The conceptual agreement is a big, big deal, and it's great to have reached this milestone, but we've got an awful lot of work going forward. Anyone who's visited Hanford knows we've got a lot of work going forward for decades out there. Of our over $8 billion budget for the environmental management portfolio, $3 billion of that is for Hanford. That is the largest request in recent history for Hanford. As you said, we need to make thoughtful choices. And when we looked at that $3 billion envelope in terms of our back and forth with the White House and OMB, we made choices, we made thoughtful choices, but we'd be eager to have further conversations with you and your staff to make sure that we're all going forward in the way we should at Hanford.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Secretary, ensuring that our tribes and indigenous communities have access to clean, reliable power is really critical. We recently provided $75 million in the Inflation Reduction Act for the Tribal Loan Guarantee Program to help our tribes and tribal entities deploy clean energy. And we also provided the Indian Energy Program new funding to start electrifying the 30,000 tribal homes that do not have access to power. Can you talk about how the department is implementing those new investments and making sure that our tribes and tribal entities know about this and have access to those opportunities?
So this is a top priority for us on the tribal loan program. It was terrific to be able to have to be able to issue loans directly to tribes. That's not something that we had before, and thanks to Congress, we have that ability to do that. We have been very proactive in all our conversations in reaching out to tribes, to leaders all across the country. We've literally had hundreds of outreach meetings. The head of our loan program office, Jigger Shaw, was just out recently meeting with the head of the Nez Perce tribe to make sure that we are making aware everybody who can take advantage of these programs. And I'm told we are hopefully on track to have a first loan this summer with many more to come after that. And our Indian Energy Office is working all the levers and all the authorities that they have as well to be very proactive and forward-leaning here.
Well, as you know, tribes in Washington State and really across the country, they each have unique energy demands and challenges. Talk to me about how the department is working specifically with tribes to identify their specific needs and opportunities.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. It is unique challenges. It's uniquely situated. I know in my own meetings, you can't make assumptions about what communities or what tribes need. You've got to listen and put in the actual work and the sweat equity to not only do the webinars and do the calls, but actually go out to the communities, to listen to the communities, and to figure out what tools we have in the tool belt to help that particular community and this particular community and have it driven by the tribe itself, as it should be given the sovereignty of the tribes. So that's the approach that we're taking. It is time intensive, it is resource intensive. That's why it's so important to keep the funding streams coming on that front so that we can have the ability to do that kind of proactive outreach and listening to make sure that we are bringing all the tools that we have to the table to help tribes.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention to that. You know, industrial emissions have made up roughly 30% of the U.S. climate emissions. And to address the climate crisis, we need to modernize our industrial manufacturing base and work to reduce emissions across the cement, steel, aluminum, glass, paper, and ceramics industries. Last Congress, we provided about $6 billion for that work across multiple DOE program offices and functions. How do you plan to get this industrial decarbonization funding out the door quickly and effectively?
Well, we've got the historic amount, the over $6 billion, and then we also have our regular appropriations request, where we're requesting $320 million more in our annual appropriations request, all complementary to that $6 billion as well. What we're doing is bringing folks across the department. We have a variety of offices that have expertise that can help in the industrial decarbonization space. So the Secretary has launched a joint strategy team on industrial technologies. It literally brings 80 folks from a variety of different offices across the department so that we can have a coherent strategy, a proactive strategy on industrial technology. We've got subgroups for iron and steel and subgroups for petrochemicals, to break this up into the manageable chunks it needs to be broken up. We've also had great conversations with our White House colleagues and our interagency colleagues to make sure that this is an all-of-government unified effort going forward. And we've had terrific discussions with your colleagues, your staff on the committee, about having some modest funding to support these joint strategy teams so that we can make sure that this continues and there's a real center of gravity and institutionalization going forward.
Well, thank you